Hi,
Hi,
welcome.
welcome.
This is Nothing But Fun Bible
Hi,
Talk, and I'm Emily
welcome.
Trotter, your host. So weird to say host. Anyway, hi, glad you're here. Glad you're back with us. Glad you're tuning in for the first time. Be sure that if you are just listening to this, know that the opportunity is available for you to head over to YouTube and look up Emily Trotter or Emily Trotter Nothing But Fine or Emily Trotter Nothing But Fine Bible Talk, and you will find the videos of these podcasts. I just really think that I'm entertaining to watch. Definitely to listen to, but I do a lot of things with my face. Um, if you've ever talked to me in person, you understand that. My face says a lot. But hi, yeah, do that or go and not or, but and go to nothingbutfine.com and you can get the notes to these Bible studies. And that's not to say it's word for word. It's what I started out with and where I thought it was going to go. And then sometimes it doesn't go there. Sometimes they're two totally different things. So I encourage you to do that. And while you're there, you can sign up for the newsletter. Be sure you sign up for the newsletter. Newsletter. It's super fun. I love writing it. It's just once a month. It's just a short little blurb of what I've been up to, and I share what I'm loving lately. Yeah, so be sure you do that, okay? So we're going to get right into it. Look, last week we talked about Mary and Martha, more about Martha because I mean Mary, she's a goody goody and always makes the right decisions, and there's just really not much to be said about her, right? But I talked about the first time that Jesus, that it's mentioned that Jesus is with them in the Bible, and we used Luke chapter 10 verses 38 through 42, and I had intended to cover them in one, and I really just didn't want to do that. I wanted to give more time to the second part of what the third time that we see them mentioned full out. We know it's them. We think that we see Mary three times because um, she, we believe, most people believe all the things say that she's meant that they're mentioned three times because we think that Mary is the one that poured the expensive perfume on the feet of Jesus that got Judas all riled up about it could have been sold and spent on something else. We believe that was Mary that did that. It is right after this happens with her brother Lazarus, and the story that we're going to talk about today. And the thing to note about Mary, the whole point of Mary is every time we see her, this is kind of cool. And it's why I called her goody goody. Every time we see her, she is at the feet of Jesus. Last week, Luke 10, she's sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to him as a disciple would, listening and learning from him. In John 11, that we're going to talk about today, when she sees Jesus, she rushes out to him and falls to his feet. Obviously, when she is pouring out her perfume on his feet, she's pouring it out on his feet and wiping it with her hair. All three of those times, Mary is at his feet. She knows who he is. And that humility and the humbleness that she has to treat him in that way, right? So the story that we're going to talk about today, so that's Mary. That's why I think she's a goody goody, and that's why I relate more to Martha, her big sister. I assume it's her big sister, okay? So there's that. Today, the story is in John 11, and look, the reason that I wanted to talk more about it is because that I have a story of how it ministered to me, because it's all about me, right? Of how this story ministered to me. I'm just going to read it first. Okay. Now, at the beginning of John 11, it's now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, remember, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. Okay. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. So we're going to skip down, and that was up until verse 7. We're going to skip down to verse 11. And after he said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. Foreshadowing. Okay, I'm going to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. And Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Okay. On his arrival, skipping down to verse 17, on his arrival, this is John 11:17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus has already been put in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to him, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who has come into the world. And after she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village and was still at the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. Okay, now look. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. Verse 38. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor that for he has been there 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. That's the story of how Lazarus was raised from the dead. It's not the only time we've seen Jesus raise somebody from the dead. The 12-year-old girl, as he was going to heal, who died before he got there, he raised her. And then he also raised a widow's son. He saw him coming out. He felt sorry for her. He raised her son from the dead. So this is not the only time that this happens. This is a big deal. And obviously a very moving story, because he knew Lazarus, spent time with him, and he wept. And I love this. First of all, there are so many aspects of this story that I love. I love this story so very much. First of all, he wept and he was troubled and felt compassion because they were so upset. He was moved by their grief. He was moved on behalf of these two women who clearly loved him and respected him and knew exactly who he was. Martha gets to say this. The Martha that just a little bit ago was busy doing things, and he said, Martha, Martha, you are distracted doing a lot of things. You're anxious about a lot of things, but Mary's doing what's best. Martha is the one that gets to, in this story, say, I know who you are. You are the Christ. You are God's son. You have been sent here. And I believe, yes, I know that we will be She knew these deep truth. This truth had been revealed to her in her time with God and her time with Jesus, because obviously she had done some sitting at his feet, because she had gotten the revelation that he was God's son and that they would be resurrected with him. She knows. She says, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. I know all of this is going to happen, but I want him alive now. And Jesus said, you just said that you said that you believe this. And he says, do you believe? And she said, yes, Lord. Yes, I believe. That's what Martha said. She gets this opportunity to name who he is in front of the disciples, in front of whoever was traveling with him. She gets this opportunity to state her faith. Number one, I love that. I love that about Martha. I love that she ran out to meet him. She didn't wait for him to come to the house. She ran out to meet him. And she said, why didn't you come earlier? If you had been here. She believed. She believed that if Jesus had been there, he wouldn't have died. But she also believed that Jesus could work a miracle. And she went and got Mary. She went and got her sister. She didn't keep Jesus to herself. She ran and got Mary and said, Jesus wants to see you. He's here. And Mary does the same thing. She runs out and falls at his feet and said, if you had just come earlier, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be mourning. He wouldn't have died if you had been here, because you could have healed him. That's what they're saying. They are professing their belief. These two women. Do you believe like that? Do you believe that God can raise someone from the dead? The reason that this story means a lot to me is because 18 years ago, I had picked up this book called Having a Mary Heart in a Martha World. I've mentioned it before. And I was reading through this book because I identify more as a Martha and not as I'm always busy. I always feel like I've gotten better at this the older I've gotten, that I don't always have to be doing something that, if somebody calls and says, hey, what did you do today? I shouldn't feel guilty for saying, you know what? I just sat and read. I didn't do anything today. I rested today. But we feel guilty saying that, right? Right? Yeah, that's why it's Martha World, because we always got to be busy doing, serving. We've always got to be doing that, right? So I was reading this book because I wanted to be better at having a Mary heart and being a Martha. It's a hard thing. And I had just gotten to the part where this story is mentioned, and it just struck me that they ran out and said, if you had been here before, this wouldn't have happened. You got here too late, Jesus. You got here too late. If you had been here before, we wouldn't have to go through all of this now. That really struck me. And about a month later, my 2-year-old son was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He was diagnosed with cancer. And in that moment when his surgery had been pushed, we were, emergency, we were in for MRI one afternoon. They wouldn't let us go home. He was scheduled for emergency surgery the next morning. A bunch of doctors we'd never met or ever seen before. And the surgery had gotten pushed back that day. And so he ended up not going back till way later in the afternoon. Little thing hadn't eaten, was having seizures. It was the longest day. It was the absolute longest day. And, we were in the waiting room, and I mean, it was 10 o'clock before the doctors came up to say that they had, how the surgery had gone and all that. And he says, this doctor who we were at Eggleston in Atlanta, and there was one pediatric brain surgeon there at the time. And he was